You open your eyes to notice yourself in an institution known as a hospital. The clock has begun to tick. You're weighed, measured, and tested. Your parents both work for the majority of the day, so you grow up in a daycare. You learn in elementary school, then high school, then university. You graduate and finally get your degree. You're able to use that degree to work at an accomplished institution. You marry, have children, and start a family somewhere along the way. You and your partner are busy with work, so you send your children off to daycare while you're off building a better future for them. You earn money for as long as you can, providing for yourself and your family until you retire. Then you do retire, only to open your eyes in a care home. Where'd they go, you ask yourself? Your children you fed and nurtured and helped grow, your family that seemed to be by your side all along, the future you were promised full of freedom and personal choice, where did it all lead you? Then you ask yourself, how could I have saved myself from this impending feeling of loneliness? We snip it at its root. The hospital, it's where it all started, isn't it? Then the daycare, then elementary school, high school, university, and then your job. What do all of these things have in common? They're all run by institutions. You see, as a child, you're sent to school for 8 hours of your day, 5 days a week for most of the year, being fed whatever the government decides is right, because at the end of the day, they need obedient and efficient workers. You keep that up for about 12 years, and at the end of high school, you'll have these open houses and scholarships that almost push you towards a post-secondary education when you haven't even figured anything out in life, burdening you with a decision that will cost you tens of thousands of dollars for you to come out of the other end and often be chained into a 9-to-5 job. You work your strenuous job all day to come home exhausted, not being able to do anything productive, and if you have a wife and children, they'll be exhausting themselves in their own institutionalized lives as well. You'll probably keep that up until you can retire, and by then, your children have entered the busy age of their lives, being absorbed into their 9-to-5 job, so they'll just send you to a nursing home because of how much of a burden you've become, which is another institution. You'll be rotting in seclusion until death pays you a visit, from which an institution will carry your soulless body into the depths of darkness. Your entire life is being controlled by these institutions, quite literally from birth to death. Now, you might think, so what if we're always under the care of corporations? They're the professionals after all. It's all well-meaning, right? But this innocent way of thinking is detrimental when you're dealing with the most powerful people in society. You're more profitable to these institutions when you're lonely and confused. That's when you'll get hooked on their products while their algorithms break down your psychology better than you can. That's when they'll feed you whatever propaganda they desire, injecting you with clickbait titles and lustful visuals. They sit in their labs convincing you you're free as they pull your strings one by one. You're fighting against the best minds and supercomputers that are trying to addict you to their products. Because at the end of the day, their job is to maximize profit regardless of long-term consequences. We're going to take a look at how exactly these institutions separate you from everyone else and convince you you're free before addicting you. And I'm not here to villainize any of these institutions per se, but when you remove the curtains and look past what the media shows you, everything begins to fall in place. Maximizing profit is the name of the game for these institutions, and in order to do that, they need a game plan to addict the masses altogether. The first step to controlling the mass is confusion. You flood them with negativity. This negative feeling arouses panic. Those in panic seek relief by any means, and there are only two ways to relieve such panic. You can either conquer the source of fear, or you can reshape your entire worldview, where the source of fear is actually a source of happiness. Institutions want the latter, to reshape your worldview so they can addict you unnoticed. Imagine a little girl growing up watching shows where the most beautiful of actresses are caked with makeup. They grow up surrounded by women that have it on as well. Then, when they actually venture into this hyper-sexualized society with beauty standards lodged deep into their brain from years of social media and television shows, did she just happen to decide to mutilate her body with plastic surgery while every centimeter of her face is plastered in harmful chemicals sold by these massive corporations? It was her choice, after all. Or was she conditioned to make such choices? All those protests against promiscuity have died out, and institutions are far past altering the worldview of the masses. Hypersexuality has become the beauty standard rather than the source of fear and panic it once was. We're given a false freedom of choice while they condition us to crave their products. This psychosis is comparable to totalitarianism, where the descent into delusion of the masses is caused by confusion, and confusion is caused by lies and propaganda portrayed by the media. As you try to process one lie, 10 other clickbait world-breaking media are shoved down your throat. Do this repeatedly and even the most sound of minds will rot from sickness. The source of this sickness stems primarily from media consumption. Algorithms made by the brightest minds of our generation to addict you like a rat on drugs, craving that next hit of dopamine. Mass psychosis at this point is a piece of cake. And because social media is so addictive, people voluntarily subject themselves to such harm. No rest, no reflection, no conversation. Pure sensory overload, pure brainwashing. The second step for a mass psychosis is to separate the masses. Divide and conquer. Make them lose contact with friends, families, communities, and religion, because this is where positive people can spread positive ideas. If everyone is isolated, the impact of positive people diminishes, and those in power can implant whatever idea they want into the masses. When paired with the fact humans are social creatures that become mentally fragile when isolated, this is a perfect recipe for control. You send them off to institutions or factories to exhaust themselves all day and return to their homes feeling stressed or tired. Let them relieve all of the pent-up emotion in their homes. They either explode on each other at the smallest of missteps, or they just turn on the TV or social media and subject themselves to further indoctrination until their next shift at work. What is a confused and lonely soul going to do but obey every command and believe every idea? But this isn't even the end of the corruption. We're just getting started. In recent years, we've seen a dangerous idea spread like wildfire. This life is all we have, so the goal is to maximize pleasure, and consumption maximizes pleasure. Though we need to consume to some degree, shelter, food, clothes, a vast majority of happiness cannot be labeled consumerist by nature. To have a loving partner to spend your life with, to have beautiful children that cool your eyes when you're worried, to have righteous friends that aid you in making this world a better place. Humans naturally crave these feelings, so institutes can't just remove it. Rather, they substitute it with something more appealing. Why marry a loving partner when you're a few taps away from a hookup or pornography? Why raise loving children when you can just ship them to a daycare for their entire day? Why have successful friends in real life when you can just log into a video game and feel connected that way? Why eat healthy when hormone-injected fast food is much cheaper and quicker? But pornography, daycares, video games, and fast food are new inventions, right? And new inventions mean more progress and freedom, right? We're more free than ever. Our ancestors had to struggle to find food, but we can get it with a few taps. But if taps are problematic, we invented voice commands. But this isn't enough. What if we implant chips in our brain so we can order food with our thoughts? But chewing is quite a chore while this body becomes obese and ridden with diseases. What if we got rid of this body altogether and lived virtually in a simulation? We'd be so much more free, giving up everything that makes us human to begin with. And thus, we would see humankind fall prey to its own intellect and inventions, becoming extinct. This is the nature of freedom in its ultimate form, the utter rejection of everything that makes us human, and instead makes us fragmented and isolated. So take heed in my warning. What you imagine to be freedom is often just a path to loneliness and self-annihilation, conditioned by the media. The question still stands. How do we put an end to this era of loneliness? Parallel structures. A business organization or movement that exists within a totalitarian society, but morally outside of it. Essentially a group that rebels against oppression, refusing to become enslaved. Václav Havel, the last president of Czechoslovakia who lived under communist rule, noted that these parallel structures worked better against totalitarianism than political activity. Parallel structures show the totalitarians that the masses won't give up without a fight. This keeps the authorities in check so they don't abuse their power more than they already have. When parallel structures thrive, they become a parallel society, functioning as a beacon of hope and a safe haven where people can live different lives, affected very little by the onslaught developing outside of the parallel society. If the fuel for totalitarianism is lonely and confused individuals, then the cure would be a strong and united group of individuals. A revolution that strengthens the soul and bonds people together in a strongly knit community, turning the lonely and confused into an impenetrable union built upon strong individuals, reviving everything we've lost. We already have a parallel society in the West called Islam, and without trying to jump to conclusions, it's the only group that combats modernity at large. We're in the midst of an ideological war, a war in which we as Muslims refuse to give up faithful marriage, we refuse to give up motherhood and fatherhood, we refuse to let our mothers, sisters, and daughters sexualize themselves to mutilation in the name of false freedom, we refuse to let our fathers, brothers, and sons abandon their duty to their families for some measly fortune, we refuse to ship our parents off when they become burdensome, we refuse to abandon that which makes us human. Yet, the very media that induces this mass psychosis is the one that will accuse us of restricting freedom and being oppressive. The mainstream media label us radical barbarians that refuse to change, that refuse to reform. And why wouldn't they target the biggest threat to their agenda? How are you going to addict a population that routinely prays together, fasts together, and reminds each other of death and what comes after? They've seen again and again throughout history the power of Muslims, when we stemmed from the most barren and undeveloped lands, becoming one of the strongest forces to walk this planet, a group that is intolerant of evil and protective of good. There is no room for neutrality in this ideological war. So educate yourself on the catastrophic dilemma of modern times, and educate yourself on Islam, and decide which side of history you'll ally with. As this modern form of totalitarianism uses lies and propaganda to make people lonely and fearful, we use the truth to make people united and strong.